Eye.
A lobster's eye is located at the end of a long, movable stalk. The eye has a hard, curved surface that is made up of thousands of tiny lenses. Each of these lenses acts like a separate eye, detecting differences in light and dark. Some lobsters are capable of seeing certain colors, such as blue and green. Because the surface of a lobster's eye is so large, lobsters see movements over a very wide angle, like the wide-angle lens of a camera. Lobsters are probably able to make out the forms and shapes of different objects.
Antennae.
The lobster's long, sensitive antennae are used to help it learn about approaching objects. Lobsters wave their antennae in front of them as they walk. The antennae tell the lobster whether to attack or retreat. Some lobsters have antennae that are so sensitive that they can smell certain kinds of undersea life forms. Other lobsters use their antennae to churn up the water in front of them and draw food toward their mouth.
Pincers.
The large claws, or pincers, are found on the first of 5 walking legs on each side of the lobster. They are used for moving over the ocean floor and for grasping food while it is being torn apart. A lobster's pincer is loaded with muscle, giving the lobster a powerful grip. Each pincer is also equipped with strong, stiff bristles at the tips for grasping. Often, lobsters will lose a large pincer in combat with a predator or another lobster. Some lobsters can grow back the lost pincer in several months.
Legs.
Shell.
A lobster's shell is very hard and covered with sharp spines, which are used to ward off enemies. This shell is made up of different pieces that are connected to each other at joints around the lobster's body. Every 3 to 4 months, a lobster outgrows its shell and must replace it with a new one. When this happens, the lobster's old shell becomes soft and falls off its body. It then takes 3 to 4 hours for the lobster's new skin underneath to harden. During this time, the lobster is almost completely helpless and often hides deep in caves so that it will not become a tasty treat for some lucky predator.
Tail.
The lobster has strong muscles in its tail, which can pull the tail down and forward very quickly. This movement can propel the lobster backward at high speeds by pushing the water beneath the tail forward. When threatened, a lobster will often use its tail to move backward and away from danger.
Brain.
Lobsters have simple brains. A lobster brain consists of a dense collection of nerves called a ganglion. The ganglion sits at the end of a long string of nerve fibers that connect the brain to the rest of the lobster's body. The combination of the brain and these long nerves is called the central nervous system. As with other animals, the lobster's central nervous system transmits tiny electrical messages between the different parts of the body and brain. For instance, nerves in the lobster's legs, eyes, and shell are constantly sending messages to the lobster's brain about its environment. The brain, in turn, sorts through these messages and reacts automatically to those messages requiring some kind of action. This type of response is called an instinct, because the lobster doesn't actually think about the action before doing it. If the lobster's eye sends a visual message to the brain, say that a fast-moving object is approaching, the lobster's brain might respond by sending an electrical message to the tail, telling the tail to close rapidly and propel the lobster to safety.
Stomach.
Lobsters don't have just one stomach, but 2. Like many animals, the lobster digests its food in stages. Food passes through the mouth into a straight digestive tract. From the digestive tract, the food moves into a large stomach known as the cardiac stomach, where it is broken down into smaller pieces. Following the cardiac stomach, the food enters a second stomach, where digestive juices known as enzymes break down the food into even smaller pieces that can now be easily absorbed by the lobster's blood cells. These enzymes are produced by a large gland located nearby, known as the digestive gland.
Tail muscle.
Digestive gland.
Reproductive organ.
This long, colorful organ is called a gonad. It is used by lobsters for reproduction. In female lobsters, the gonad produces eggs. In male lobsters, it produces sperm. Like most other invertebrates, lobsters reproduce by laying and fertilizing eggs. Once a lobster's eggs are fertilized, they are kept in a small chamber attached to the lobster's body. Several weeks later, baby lobsters, known as larvae, emerge from the eggs. During the larval stage of its development, a lobster looks nothing like it will as an adult. Instead of having a long body with a shell and claws, the lobster larva is almost circular, and it has no tail or recognizable head. Without any means of moving around, a lobster larva must float along in the ocean current. Most lobster larvae end up as a meal for some other animal. As the larva grows, it sheds its outer layer of skin. This process is called molting. With each molting, more of the lobster's parts are revealed, until a recognizable lobster finally appears.
Heart.
The lobster's heart acts like a small pump which draws oxygen-rich blood from the gills and then pumps it to the rest of the lobster's body. The blood is carried through a web of connecting blood vessels called a circulatory system. In lobsters, blood flows from the lobster's body tissues into a large body cavity known as a hemocoel, located near the middle of the lobster. From the hemocoel, the lobster's blood flows into the gills, where carbon dioxide is released by the lobster's blood cells and oxygen is absorbed from the water.